And I'm Liv, and we're your meta PsycKicks. Hi, we're Em and Liv, and we're psychic mediums. I should explain that before I talk into everything else. And we're doing Psychic Chicken today for the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, which means one of us researched all of the specifics that we could possibly find on the interwebs, not our own head movies, except for Em. Em's gonna be using her metaphysical, spiritual mediumship head movies to tell me about the Waverly Hills Sanatorium before I tell you all the lovely history of the place.
My head already hurts.
Was it on either sides and behind your eyes?
No.
Well that's good. Alright, so I'm gonna write some stuff down and then she's gonna tell me what she sees and feels and perceives as a psychic medium from the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and then I'm gonna tell you guys all the history. Let's get into it. I'm really glad that you're talking to a lot of human souls, because there's like only 2 things you can find on the internet, and then everything else is just like the stuff that we just talked about with poltergeists.
Oh.
So I kind of want to go to this place so that we can just have a tea party with all of the souls that are there and like.
Well, there's still a lot of
people. Gross
things that are there.
Yeah, but also
like the place makes me feel sick.
I'm excited. All right, psychic medium Em, I'm the intuitive. Tell me what you have. Show me what you got.
It's all written in pink. It's almost 3 pages. I could have wrote more. Okay, the Waverly Hills Hospital.
Sanatorium.
This place is on a hill, right? Also, you guys should know, I know things about it. Like, it's a place for tuberculosis because we did a reaction video. So we'll watch the reaction video. But I don't know a lot because BuzzFeed didn't go into a lot, which might be because there isn't a lot to go into. I don't know. Okay. So, it's on a hill, right?
Yeah. Waverly Hill.
Oh. Well, they're like, it's on a hill. So, okay, I'm talking to a nurse. First of all, this nurse, she understands the in and outs of the place, and she is the soul that mediates things. I think she mediates things for the people that go there. She says to an extent. But it's like, she shows me like, you know those curtains that you pull up and down? Mm-hmm. She's like, there's a curtain of like the people, and then there's the curtain of the upside down, which is the scary stuff. And she's like, I know how to deal with both sides. So when people come in here and do stupid things, I try to scare them away from the souls that are there by flipping the switch and making the upside down come in, because then she looks scary. But she's the one that controls it. It's like she growls at people to get them away from certain locations.
It's like the 3rd floor of the Windsor Castle, the Wilson Castle.
Yeah. Yeah, I see her in the middle of the hospital, and she is the one that mediates things. I see her working at a desk. She has brown hair that's pulled back in a bun, and she's working on things, but people like try to talk to things. I don't think they necessarily talk to her. She says if they do, they talk to the scary version of her. But she mediates who people talk to, unless they are trying to talk to the things that are in the upside down. And then she shows me this woman that can't breathe, because again, I know that this place is for tuberculosis, but I was asking this woman what happened, how did you get here, that type of thing. I feel like this woman had a family with a little boy and like a spouse, and they like drove her to the bottom of the hill because they weren't allowed to get any closer. So someone picked her up from the bottom of the hill and brought her to the building.
Did her son go with her?
No. Why?
Just wondering.
I don't think so. I don't know, I didn't look at that part. Because she tells me that she was completely alone, but it would make sense. Because I feel like, is there a children's wing?
I don't know, psychic medium Em.
Well, I feel like there's a children's wing because they separated people. And I feel like their children are affected differently with tuberculosis, which is why there's a wing for them. Because there's people that specialize in helping children with tuberculosis. But I don't know if that's a real thing because I'm not a doctor. But, yeah, I just saw flashes of she was dropped off at the bottom of the hill and she was brought to the top of the hill and she wanted to see her child, but she couldn't because she was in the, like, women's wing or something, and he was in the, like, children wing if you were there.
Was
he
he
makes
sick?
me feel like he was maybe there. I don't know. I mean, do you see him? Does he have brown hair?
It's like your color. And her hair's darker.
Do people try to talk to him?
They might think they're talking to someone else.
Because I don't know, I've been seeing this little boy that has dark hair that's scary, so I'm just making sure that it's not the same guy.
Yeah, it's not the
Because he looks like his mom. Because his mom has dark hair. It's like a little bit wavy and it's shoulder length and down. That's what this woman looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But she's like, tuberculosis does like weird things to your brain to cause you to have hallucinations and things like that. But she's also explaining that being put in an asylum where you're not allowed to be near other people doesn't make it any better. She's like, if you are mentally okay, you can probably deal with the stuff that tuberculosis does to your brain. But being put in an asylum where you are literally just alone 24/7 causes your brain to be taken over by the disease itself. Does that make sense? It's like, if you think you're gonna get better, you're more likely to get better because you're almost like manifesting it in a way. Like we did manifestation and that guy was like, I'm going to get better, and he did. He's like, if you're put in a place where you're depressed because you're alone all the time, you're gonna get worse.
So she was alone all the time?
Yeah.
Did she tell you why? Because it aided her brain?
Well, she was explaining that tuberculosis is very contagious, so being near the other patients was interesting. So I see her, she shows me it in a specific way. She's like in a room. She says maybe she's more like rich, which is why the room is alone. She's not with other people. And when she goes in like the other places, like the cafeteria or things like that, she is like alienated from other people there. The other people don't come up to them because they're like dealing with their own things. So she's just like completely alone. It's very similar if you guys have ever seen American Horror Story, the Asylum season. That's what it's like to me. It's like she doesn't relate to the other people because each person is affected differently by the disease on a mental state. The next thing that I see, I see a man, he's a doctor, he's intimidating because he thinks that he can do whatever he wants because it's almost like this place was cut off from society. So people didn't get in trouble because nobody wanted to go in there to do anything about it. So the doctors, the patients, they're all locked in this place because this disease was so contagious that they could never like leave. They basically lived there. So this doctor, I feel like, assaulted people because he knew that he could get away with it. And he shows me how this place was closed off from the world. So he could do whatever he wanted and get away with it, and he knew that he could. The top floor has a lot of scary things in it. I feel like the top floor was for patients that were like losing their brain. I don't know if that was correct. Is that correct?
Possibly.
Yeah, because this nurse tells me that they put the like advanced cases up on the top floor because you wouldn't have interactions with them. Because like when you walked into the place, they obviously wouldn't put them on the bottom floor because you have to walk through the like scary cases in order to like get to the place where you needed to be. So they put the people on the top floor so that it wouldn't cause disturbances or like people didn't have contact with these types of people. because the top floors, there are people that are literally screaming. So this nurse was saying if you were put up there because your disease was advancing and you haven't lost your mind yet, being put up there would cause you to lose your mind, because it's like you being put into this room and hearing people scream constantly creates a distortion of like the world. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It's like you were too far gone, so instead of trying, they just put you somewhere.
Well, no, what I'm saying is because they separated the patients that were like just had the start of the disease to the people that are more advanced. But if you were just at the cusp of becoming more advanced, you would be put with these people that are literally screaming bloody murder in the other room. And because you're hearing people scream bloody murder, it affects you psychologically.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that they told me. They also told me that people on these second floor, did they do like experiments on them?
I don't know. I couldn't find anything
Got you.
written about things like that.
Makes sense. This nurse tells me that the patients on the upper floors they would do the experiments on them,
But it might not be experiments per se. It might just be what they thought was okay back then.
well, the nurse says that they were cocky doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And because of these cocky doctors that thought that they were better than anyone else, they thought that they could like solve the problem by doing these experiments, but they wouldn't say anything about it. And it was almost like they would take people, because this nurse shows me this man, and this man was like one of the people that were screaming, one of the people that were like very mentally damaged. So he just like disappears one day because the doctors took him and they did a surgery on him, and she's telling me that the surgery was logged as something else. But they like poked around in this guy's brain to the point where he became numb. Like he was not able to do anything else. He just like became almost like a vegetable, but was still conscious. Like he couldn't move. He was just like put places in a wheelchair and just stared. When before he was taken, he was like very much not okay.
So they may have done like a advanced lobotomy to quiet him.
Yeah, I'm not
Because
sure
they
what
used to
that
do
means.
lobotomies on people that were quote unquote too outgoing.
Oh.
So if you were a woman that like spoke your mind, or someone that had learning disabilities, they would do a lobotomy on you because it takes away your ability to feel emotions. So whereas you might be like outgoing, exuberant, vivacious, talkative, etc., if that was seen as something that was hurting your ability to interact with society, i.e. the people around you just think you're annoying, they would perform lobotomies on people because it takes away their sense of self, or at least their ability to rationalize like their sense of self, if that makes sense.
How do you do a lobotomy?
You stick an ice pick through your eye and they basically swirl it around in your frontal lobe, so that whereas someone who doesn't have a lobotomy,
Okay, what would they do if it was in the back of your head? Like here?
I don't know. That's not a lobotomy. So
Because I feel like they shaved his head.
they might have done electroshock therapy as well.
I don't know. I feel like they like opened my skull right here.
They may have.
And they did something to my head, but it might have been something that was experimental.
Yeah. Well, they may have done a lobotomy to take away his like ability to express emotions about things. Oh, okay. So a lobotomy like basically makes you Spock.
I don't know who Spock is.
You never watched Star Trek?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
So if they did that, then they'd probably be able to experiment on him further if they wanted to, if that's what you're talking about.
Maybe.
Because tuberculosis can spread to other organs, not just your lungs. So if they're trying to see what it looks like in the brain, they might have cut open a piece of his head to look at his brain. I'm just telling you from a doctor's point of view. And I don't agree with it. I'm just trying to help you.
Well, yeah. That's why I asked you, because I was like, I thought that they did stuff to the front of your face when you did a lobotomy.
You do.
But he's like, it's right here on the left side of my head.
Yeah, they might have tried to take brain tissue to look at it for bacterial infection.
Yeah, because he had hair, and then when he went away, he didn't have hair anymore.
Yeah, and if they
And the
try
left
to
side
do
of my head hurts.
electroshock therapy, your hair moves. So if you shave the head, not only can you take a piece of the skull cap out to look at it, but if you do electroshock therapy to see if it changes the growth rate of bacteria within the skull, then that might be why.
Yeah, I think you're correct.
Yeah, because there's like a male doctor talking to me about it.
Yeah, because he's like, we put
Gross.
like pins in different parts of his brain. And it was like he couldn't feel it because obviously your brain doesn't have nerve endings in that way, but he did feel it. It doesn't make sense. It's not a feeling type of feeling, like a...
Yeah.
It's really weird. Because when you were talking about that, the man, because I'm talking to the man that had it done to him, he showed me what it was like when it was happening to him. But I feel like they opened up his brain and they put different, like, things in it, and that's where the shock therapy came in, because it affected different parts of his brain.
Well, if they put metal pieces in the brain, then closed everything up and did electroshock therapy, maybe they found areas in his brain that were being attacked by the bacteria, like more localized areas if they did.
Well, I didn't think they
whatever.
closed him up. They,
Well, you'd have to close it up.
well, after they took the stuff out.
Well, I'm thinking if they put metal pieces in his head, if you do electroshock therapy, then the reasoning behind that would be trying to localize the bacteria decay by shocking those specific areas of the brain.
Yeah,
Because it's like little metal conductors, but again, that's gonna fry your brain. So.
Yeah, because they tell me things that I know about Grey's Anatomy where they like stimulate certain parts of your brain to make sure that they haven't like hurt your brain.
Oh yeah, they'll put little electrical jolts to different hemispheres to be
So-
like, oh, we're doing a surgery. Let's make sure his left arm works before we close it up.
Well, they do it like when you have a tumor in your brain and they're like, do we want to cut this part of the tumor out or is it going to affect like your motor skills? They stimulate that part of the brain and then they tell you, start talking. And if you talk fine, then they'll remove that part of your brain. Mm-hmm. That's what he was describing to me happens, but they weren't qualified to do that.
Well, yeah.
Because they weren't neurologists in that type of way. So they were incompetent. I see this little girl, and I'm not sure if she's a little girl. But that's where I wrote tuberculosis affects children differently because their body isn't developed in the same way yet. So it affects their brain differently, it affects their lungs differently, they are ultimately affected in a different manner. So that's why there's a children's wing. There's this little girl, she's in a nightgown or like one of those patient gown things. And she, I feel like, talks to investigators. So I don't know if she's real or not. But you see her and then there's scary things behind her. So I wrote anglerfish, like the Annabelle stuff that we talked about. But I don't know because when you talk to dark things, it lies about things.
Does she have hair like your niece?
Yeah, it's in a ponytail. But she looks like she's like 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
7. But she doesn't talk. She just walks around and she is like lit up and then the things behind her are like scary. Like tentacles, eyes, mouths, scary. But she's from the Upside Down. So I don't know if she's real or if there's an idea surrounding her, but she won't talk because I don't know that she's real. There's also, does tuberculosis affect your like legs? Or was that something they did to them?
I don't know. I know polio does.
Well, I see this little boy, and he's scary. He's different than the one that has dark hair, but I see him, his legs don't work, and he's crawling like army crawling on the ground because his legs don't move.
When your legs don't work like they used to before.
I feel like he touches people, like from down here.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, I don't know if he's real either because he's scary. He makes a growling noise, but it's inhuman. So maybe that's Timmy, I don't fucking know.
So, sanitariums are often located in a healthy climate, usually in the countryside. The idea of healing was an important reason for the historical wave of the establishment of sanitariums, specifically at the end of the 19th and the early 20th centuries. One sought, for instance, the healing of consumptives, especially tuberculosis. So people will also use the word consumption interchangeably with tuberculosis, which is also known as the White Plague. So if you heard any three of those words, they're just talking about tuberculosis. So before the discovery of antibiotics, other places or other consumptive diseases that people would go to a sanitarium for was alcoholism and the other more obscure addictions and longings such as hysteria, masturbation, fatigue, and emotional exhaustion. These are all reasons that people would go to a sanitarium or sanatorium. Specifically though, for the Waverly Hills, it was for TB or tuberculosis. So facility operators were often charitable associations such as the Order of St. John or newly founded social welfare insurance companies or townspeople, places, government officials, things like that, which is for the case of the Waverly Hills Sanitarium. So consumption, aka tuberculosis, is a bacterial infection caused by the bacterium called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. The bacteria usually attacks the lungs, but TB bacteria can also attack any part of the body, spreading to organs such as the kidneys, spine, and brain. Oh, spine. So maybe that's why he doesn't have loose use of his legs.
Wonderful.
But not everyone infected with tuberculosis becomes ill. Sometimes they have what's known as latent onset TB or walking TB, which means you have it, but you're not actually seen as sick. So now you're just a carrier spreading it to people, which is not cool. So the Waverly Hills Sanatorium was opened in 1910, and it started out as a 2-story hospital to accommodate 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients. However, in the early 1900s, the Jefferson County area was ravaged by an outbreak of tuberculosis, also known as the White Plague, which is what prompted the construction of the 2-story hospital. So eventually, in 1961, the antibiotic drug streptomycin lowered the need for such a hospital, and the place was closed because they had a cure for tuberculosis, basically. But the original plans were to turn the now abandoned hospital, because it ended up being a nursing home, I believe, in the 80s or the 60s. It was in the 60s. In the 60s, it turned into a nursing home. They wanted to make the nursing home into a hotel.
Why?
Because it's a really big building, and they're like, we could put more people in here. This will be a great time. So let's go back in time for a second and figure out how Waverly Hill, in and of itself, came to be before the epidemic of tuberculosis in 1910, I think. So the land that is known today as Waverly Hill was purchased by Major Thomas H. Hayes in 1883 as their family home. He had 2 daughters, and he didn't have anywhere for them to go to school. So he built a 1-story schoolhouse on the top of Waverly Hill, which didn't have the name as of then. It was just the Hayes establishment, I assume. And he hired a woman by the name of Miss Lizzie Harris. I think it's Harris. Let me see. Lizzie Harris. And Lizzie Harris really fell in love with the books back then by Walter Scott's. They were called the Waverly Novels. And he thought that name was great, so they ended up calling it the Waverly School as well as Waverly Hills. He just named his whole property over it. And that's how the land stayed for a long time, was the Hayes homestead as well as the school that they built for their children, and I'm assuming neighboring children as well, until The early 1900s, when the property was acquired by the Jefferson County Commission or whatever. And that is when an epidemic of tuberculosis happened because the Ohio River ran through that area, and because of the hot, moist, humid temperatures,
Gross.
It was a perfect breeding ground for tuberculosis bacterium, which is why the surrounding county was so absolutely plagued with the White Plague. So they're like, we need to do something about this. And Jefferson County ended up purchasing the property, and that is where they built the first 2-story wooden building to house 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients for quarantine. Now, back then they didn't know how to cure people of tuberculosis. And like Em said, with our manifestation case, literally what doctors prescribed was a well-balanced diet, plenty of fresh air, and rest and relaxation. That were the staples of curing tuberculosis. And either you got better from a balanced diet, fresh air, and just chillaxin, or you didn't. And that was it. Either you got better or there was no in between. So eventually the tuberculosis cases got greater. A hospital was built, but they didn't want to keep tuberculosis patients at a hospital. So they specifically built the sanatorium on Waverly Hill and just kept the name. So to try and contain the disease, the 2-story wooden sanatorium opened and consisted of an administrative or main building and 2 open-air pavilions, each housing 20 patients for the treatment of, quote, early cases. So not when they're really, really sick and about to die. In the early part of 1911, the city of Louisville began to make preparations to build the new Louisville City Hospital, and the hospital commissioner decided in their plans that there would be no provisions made for the new city hospital or for the admission of pulmonary tuberculosis. And the Board of Tuberculosis Hospital was given $25,000 in 1911 to erect the sanatorium for specifically the pulmonary tuberculosis cases. So that's why this building was built. So TB patients were not allowed in the country's hospital, and in addition to trying to have more rooms and beds for people to be sick in, before they actually built this 5-story Gothic collegiate style sanitarium, they had tents. Literally tents for people because, fresh air was a part of the way that people were supposed to get better, not being in dungy, musty, sticky rooms. So that was fun. But if you get sick and your husband can't watch the kids and you're a wife and you have tuberculosis, where are your kids gonna go? In the tents next door, on the opposite side of the hill, which is great. So on August 31st, 1912, all tuberculosis patients from the city hospital were relocated to temporary quarters on tents in the grounds of the Waverly Hills, pending the completion of the hospital for advanced cases. In December 1912, the sanitarium for advanced cases opened for the treatment of another 40 patients. In 1914, a children's pavilion added another 50 beds, making the known capacity to be now around 130 patients. So from the 2-story wooden building, they added pavilions and accessory tents to not only house children of the sick patients, but children who were sick themselves and sick adults. So the children's pavilion was not only for sick children, but also for the children of tuberculosis patients who could not be cared for properly otherwise. This report also mentions that the goal was to add a new building each year to continually grow, so that there may have even been more beds available than specifically listed. So that is how eventually, I think it was in 1924, the 180,000 square foot 5-story building came to be. You're welcome. So in March 1924, that is when more than 400 patients could be capped at this sanatorium. So 400 capacity plus. That's a lot of people for tuberculosis.
It's a little big place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Em said that there were doctors there that were excited about the fact of being crappy people because it was very isolated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Waverly Hills was a self-contained community, a city in and of itself, complete with its own zip code. It had its own post office, water treatment facility, grew its own fruits and vegetables, raised its own meat for slaughter, and maintained many of the other necessities of everyday's life. Everyone at Waverly Hills, patients, nurses, doctors, and other employees had to say goodbye to everything they knew on the outside world. Once you went to Waverly Hills, you became a permanent resident on the hill. Oddly enough, despite that fact, many patients received visits from loved ones on visiting days, but when the visit day was over, the community went back to how it was. So, I looked at the prognosis for tuberculosis patients because I thought once you had TB, that was it. You just stayed there forever. But I think that's the case for nurses and doctors, but not necessarily patients, because the prognosis, but I don't necessarily know if it was for now or for back then. I think it was for back then. Is 6 to 9 months of quarantine, of fresh air, a balanced diet, whatever. And then you had to see if you were good. But if you had more of a latent stage case or you were struggling with getting better, then it was up to a year that you would have to stay in a sanatorium. Now into the not so cool treatments that Em was kind of touching upon. So, physicians often prescribed fresh air and sunlight. These curative measures were often carried out all season, including in the depths of winter. Other approaches were markedly more brutal. So let's just talk about fresh air. I saw a photo from, I think it was UK. It was some orthopedic hospital, but that also at some point in time when TB was epidemic in the UK, this hospital would put people outside in the middle of winter. There was literally a picture of all of these people on wrought iron beds with little pads underneath them, bundled up like tortillas. And you could see that they were all outside on a bed facing the sky with snow on the ground. And they had these little mirrors on the top that they could position so that they could see the person next to them. And I'm just like, interesting. But I mean, like, if you don't have like an air purifier or a dehumidifier and you're in like a hot, stuffy hospital with a whole bunch of other people that are sick, and if the disease spreads by being in confined quarters and like literally droplets of things landing on your tongue from me to you, I guess it kind of makes sense to be outside. And like, they weren't not bundled up, but
yeah, this man tells me that it felt good to be out there for a while, but they would keep them out there for too long, and then when you run around in the cold, you get that like cramp in your chest. They're like, it's already hard for us to breathe, so putting us out in the cold for too long causes us to get cramps in a similar way, because it would be like they're running in their like how they breathe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because they're not actually running. They're just bundled up like tacos.
Well, they said that they just can't breathe as well because they have freaking tuberculosis. So they're like, you put us outside long enough, it's like running a mile, because when you run, your breathing gets labored. Our breathing is already labored, so we would get cramps after a while. But going out there initially felt better because it like cooled stuff down, because there's like this burning sensation that you get in the back of your throat and in your chest.
Yeah, just like Em said, some people might have taken it a little too far of prolonging their exposure to being outside to not necessarily a benefit anymore, but a detriment to the people. So, you know. Now, if you were getting a balanced diet, fresh air and sunlight and rest, then that's great. But if it was excessive, that's not cool. It's also not cool when other approaches were not as cool, such as some cases, patients had their lungs surgically resected or partially removed, and other doctors thought it was awesome to try and collapse one lung in order to let the organ rest while the other one took the heavy load. I feel like if you're a doctor and you think that you have to let a lung or an organ rest by making it stop functioning, you're not a doctor.
You don't know how the human body works.
Or you're just not... You don't have the constructive critical thinking skills in order to facilitate normal human existence, let alone on a level that you think you're God. Anyways... patients endured a regime of fresh air at all seasons and were forced to have exposure in extreme weather situations. The occasional surgery also, in addition to surgically resecting their lungs or collapsing them, they thought that it was cool to surgically remove ribs, as it was thought that this procedure would make it easier for patients to breathe. It's just like I understand where you think this might, it's just the smallest whiff of critical thinking. And it's just that. It's like a stinky whiff. That's it. It just makes me angry. Anyways.
They don't understand the human anatomy. If you collapse one lung, you're still putting the same amount of effort, but it's just one lung.
Yeah.
How the fuck does that even work?
It's like if both of your tires were about to blow out, so in order to try and make it easier for the other tire to keep going, you just slash the other one so it's entirely flat, and you're like, this car is going to be able to run. Perfect. Anyways. So, let's talk about the fact that there was about 50,000 deaths that happened at this place. At the time that this place was erected and tuberculosis was ravaging the United States, TB cases or TB deaths were 25% of the world's mortality rate. So 25% of all US deaths at this time were from TB. So that's a lot. Let's talk about the tunnel. The tunnel served as a passageway to transport bodies and supplies in and out of the sanitarium. It was built on the first floor with the rest of the building. The corridor is about 500 feet long to the bottom of the hill and has a set of stairs on one side, which were the stairs used for the workers. On the other side, there was a cart that moved up and down the staircase, which transported supplies and other necessities. Since antibiotics did not exist at the time that the sanatorium was active, other forms of aids were used to treat TB patients. For example, heat lamps, fresh air, positive talk and reassurance helped to keep patients alive, since the death rate of TB patients at the time was 1 death per day. However, at the peak of the disease, the sight of dead people being carried away in full view of other patients lowered the patient morale. So, what they did is they used the tunnel to have dead bodies just moved from the top floor down to the hill so that other people that were alive and trying to get better didn't get saddened by seeing other people that died being carted out. So, yeah, you're welcome. Hence, the tunnel was known as the body chute or the death tunnel by the locals and paranormal investigators who have since visited the sanitarium. Apart from transporting dead bodies out of the sanitarium, the tunnel also served as a temporary air raid shelter during World War II. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium closed in June of 1961 because streptomycin was invented in 1943 and the number of tuberculosis cases gradually lowered until there was no longer need for such a large hospital. The remaining patients were sent to Hazelwood Sanatorium in Louisville. So, in 1962, since Waverly Hills closed as a TB center in 1961, opened and was renamed Woodhaven Medical Center or Woodhaven Geriatric Center, which was a nursing home primarily treating aging patients of various stages of dementia and mobility limits, as well as the severely mentally handicapped. However, Woodhaven failed greatly because it was severely understaffed and extremely overcrowded. Woodhaven also had reports of patient neglect and was closed by the state of Kentucky in 1982. Because of such cases of neglect, overcrowding, and understaffing. So the people with mental disabilities and mobility issues might actually be from then. So,
do you have any hauntings? What do people believe is haunted there?
Oh, I forgot. Thanks for letting me remember. So throughout the course of its lifetime, Waverly Hills Sanatorium had lost an estimated 50,000 patients. Tuberculosis, 1 person a day. So playing catch. In the past, young boys were known to enjoy a game of catch, so it should come to no surprise that one of the most popularly recognized ghosts at Waverly Hills Sanatorium is a young boy that they have named Timmy, who enjoys playing catch with visitors of the building. It's said that if you roll a ball down a long hallway, oftentimes Timmy, the soul or spirit, will roll the ball ball back to you, which is fun. However, they also say that some of the ghosts there are not so friendly. Dun dun.
Is Timmy supposed to be friendly?
Timmy's supposed to be friendly, but we only see the scary version of Timmy.
Is there a non-scary version of Timmy? Because that's what I've been trying to see for a while.
Possibly, but I don't think so.
I don't see one, so...
Yeah. But, I mean, lots of kids went there because, again, their parents couldn't take care of them, so they just lived there.
I know that, but I don't see a soul that is associated to this Timmy entity other than this scary thing that rolls the ball back.
Yeah.
Great.
There's also a nurse. There's another ghost that is often cited at the location is a woman who once worked as a nurse back when the Waverly Hills was operating as a tuberculosis facility. The story goes that the nurse unalived herself via method of hanging in the building, and she's now believed to still be roaming the hallways.
That's not the lady I was talking to.
No. And then there's also a man in white. Take that, lady in white. There's a dude version of you. Anyways. Finally, the least frequently cited specter is a mysterious man in a white... He's just in white. I see him as a doctor, like in a white lab coat.
Yeah, I don't see him like the women in white we normally see.
Yeah.
So...
but
Take
he's
that.
the mysterious man in white that drifts through the corridors late at night. There's no information regarding who this ghost person was in life, but his presence is often cited by individuals brave enough to take a deep dive into the maze-like facility. Also, I read some people's accounts of going on the tours there, and they always say that the top floor is the most haunted.
Yeah, because isn't that where they put all this bad cases?
I didn't find anything about sectioning for the place. However, the fact that you said that, I was like, everyone else says it's super spoopy too, and we haven't even been there.
Oh, yeah. The nurse lady says they put them up there because when new patients came in, they had to come in on the bottom floor, and they didn't want to be in contact with the people that had advanced TB because they didn't understand how it worked.
I think when we reacted to this video initially too, I told you that there was people screaming.
Up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after Woodhaven Geriatric Place closed in 1962, Simpsonville developer J. Clifford Todd bought the hospital. It's not a hospital, it's a sanitarium. In 1983 for $3 million and $5.
For a second, it was a hospital.
He and architect Milton Thomas wanted to convert it into a minimum security prison for the state. But the developers dropped the plan after neighbors protested. Todd and Thomas then proposed converting the hospital. Todd and Thompson then proposed converting the hospital into apartments.
What is wrong with people? They do that a lot.
But they counted on Jefferson Fiscal Court to buy around 140 acres or 57 hectares of land, from them to fund about $400,000, giving them the money to just start the project. And if you wanted to know if that worked, it didn't, because after these people wanted it to be a nursing home for geriatric and mentally ill people, then they wanted it to be a low security prison and possibly apartments. Then in March 1996, Robert Alberhasky bought Waverly Hills and the surrounding area. Alberhasky's Christ the Redeemer Foundation Incorporated made plans to construct the world's tallest statue of Jesus on the site, along with an arts and worship center. The statue, which was inspired by the famous Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro, would have been designed by local sculptor Ed Hamilton and architect Jasper Ward. The first phase are said to fun, of development, coming in at a cost of $4 million, would have been a statue of 150 feet tall and 150 feet wide, situated on the roof of the sanatorium. The second phase would convert the old sanatorium into a chapel, theater, and a gift shop, all costing $8 million or more. The plan to construct this religious icon fell through because donations to the project fell well short of expectations. In 1 year, only $3,000 was raised towards the project despite efforts to pull money from across the nation. The project was canceled in December of 1997. Since then, After Aberhaskey's efforts failed, the Waverly Hills was sold to Tina and Charlie Mattingly in 2001. Now, the Mattingleys hold tours of the Waverly Hills and host a haunted house attraction each Halloween, and all of the proceeds go towards restoring the property. They're also currently restoring all the windows of the building while restoring the interior of the old sanatorium. And I think now if you go there today, all of the windows have been replaced. It actually looks pretty nice.
Why have they been replaced?
Because, well, they use it for ghost tours.
Okay.
And normal tours. And kids thought it was really cool to go in there and smash the windows out and do all teenage kid things with
kids things. Poltergeisty activity.
Exactly. For years and years and years, and they were just like, disrespect your surroundings! And then the Mattingleys are like, please don't. We're gonna make these windows nice, and they have. So it makes me happy that someone's actually bought a haunted or whatever location, or are actually trying to restore it and make it nice. Kentucky. We can go there. Yeah, why not?
We could go there.
As long as you say Louisville. There you go.
Louisville.
We can't get beat up.
Yeah.
We're gonna get beat up.
Louisville. Yeah, let's go there.
We can do that. I'm okay with that. It would be fun. It looks really pretty. And I like that the people...
There's a lot of things to talk to.
There's a lot of things to talk to. And the people that own it seem to be nice. So,
let's do it. If you guys want us to do it.
If we get 50,000 likes on the video, we'll
that's
go
what I was
to
gonna...
Louisville, Kentucky.
50,000, you got that?
50,000 likes.
You can do it. There. We'll do it.
Only you
have the power
to prevent bad videos.
Only you have the power to make us go there. So, if you like this content and would like to suggest other content or other places for us to react to,
put it in the comments below.
Put it down there, my dude. And if you like this content, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thank you to our lovely patrons. We are your PsycKicks. We out.